the NFL who can just write a check with 17 zeros on it and get all the tests.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see that, and be interesting to see what happens with college football. I don't.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I mean, you're in a good space with the team that you pull for because they're one of the schools that definitely can afford
to just write a check with
to. Hey, where's all that feedback coming from, Rusty?
Unsure. I think it's maybe it controls.
I just heard myself talk but 6 seconds behind.
That might have been me. I was checking out the YouTube link and then I clicked it off.
Got it.
Oh, yeah, that's what happened. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to say like the Clemsons and Georgias and Alabamas and Auburns of the world, Notre Dame, they're going to be able to afford the testing if they want to afford the testing. But the Sun Belt, they don't have a season this year. You know, the American Athletic Conference, they don't have a season. There's no way. They're just not money making schools. I mean, and we're in a situation with our schools kind of like that. I mean, they make some money, but they don't make, SEC money.
I don't know if anybody makes SEC money.
Well, that's a good point. Looks like I managed to give myself a wound, so I'm going to go figure out how to stop that.
The hotel room is bitten back.
Yeah, he said he's moving up my direction.
That's right. Yeah, he's in, I guess, Moxville right now, but he was down or over at Lake Norman earlier.
Yeah, I think he said he's actually moving to Mooresville, so that's where I am. So.
I said Moxville. I meant Mooresville. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I think, folks, if you're on the YouTube, I might be previewing it here, but Sherwin was hanging out today with Jennifer Jo Cobb, and this is his first day back. And Max Pappas was sitting 10 feet away. He was having happy hour with Jennifer Jo Cobb, and I was like, man, moved to Mooresville and already like day one taking advantage. This is pretty cool. So
yeah. People who are outside of Charlotte don't want to be down in that mess.
Yeah.
Don't mention that on the podcast, Rusty, because I don't think Jennifer was supposed to be there.
Oh, might be.
So you can say I saw Max Pappas though, and then sing Happy Birthday to Marco.
Nice. All right. Well, YouTube is on and going, and I'm about ready to roll. Are y'all ready to go?
Sure.
Sweet.
Have we got any signers on yet? I'll
talk to folks hanging out. We got Beast and Raja and Jumpy Bob, and apparently 7.
I'm about to do that same feedback thing.
Okay.
I actually have to refresh it for start. I didn't get the notification this time.
Kelly, it's been a while since you've been on. I'll go dark for maybe a minute and a half or something like that, but then I'll come back and you'll hear us and all that stuff. So. And we'll be, of course, a lot more lively because I can do that once you hear the song, once everything gets going. Cool. Sherwin, you ready now?
I'm ready. I just, this thing's acting up.
Okay.
But that's okay.
Okay. Well.
Yeah. I don't know where the newest one is, but it hasn't popped up on mine yet. That's okay though. I don't have to see it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, here we go. We are recording now.
Now. There it is.
All right, we are stopping recording because Sherwin keeps talking. It's okay. All right, recording again now. Welcome, y'all! That's right. This is the Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Racing Podcast, episode number 252. It's Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. I'm Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace, and I'm in the PTM Podcast studio. We'll get to our co-hosts in a moment. Before we do that, you know what the deal is. This podcast is sponsored by you. That's right. Go to patreon.com/PTM. Join the What You Drink Club for as little as $1 a month to get that free koozie and some stickers. Best part is every cent this year, we are once again donating to sponsored drivers. So join the PTM Posse today. Be a part of the sport you love. This week's show brought to you by our official sponsors at that $5 and up per month level. Here we go. Aaron Bearden, Robert Kemlinger, Coleman McClam, Eric Kepner, Ryan Kiefer, Patrick Cleary, Jeff Brown, Brandon Crow, Kathleen McDonald, Stacey Wright, Brandon Carl, Rika Porter, John Bob, Les Miller, Julie Bosley, Eddie Grid, Third Yonker Motorsports, David Mullins, Patrick Johnson, Brett Morris, Crystal Smoke, Rep Risotto, Chad Knapp, and Stacey Coleman, Lisa Chinana, Rick Houston, Sarah and Barry, Evan Rollerpad, and Brad Harrison, Matthew Bishop, Matthew Camper, Harry Bolzania, and Evan Jones. Thank you, PTM Posse. Well, I might have halfway given the preview there, but we're introducing the PTM North Carolina studio with pregame engineer Andrew Sherwin. What's up, dude?
Yeah, first time up here. Well, yeah, first time for me doing the podcast up here, but this is going to be the, not the new weird normal. This is going to be the new permanent.
The new permanent, that's right. So we got PTM South, PTM North, and they're all North Carolina or lower.
Right.
And coming out to hang out with us. You know, we took a week off for summer vacation, and prior to that, we talked football and barbecue with Joe Hamilton, and before that, we dug deep with Eddie DeHunt. And Sherwin, it feels like it's been like a month since I really got to talk racing and talk NASCAR and talk about what's going on, you know what I mean? So I'm excited because our guest tonight, she's a motorsports journalist with Racer Magazine, host of the Racing Writers Podcast, and multi-time PTM PhD on Twitter at Kelly Crandall. It's Kelly Crandall. What's up, Kelly?
That's quite an introduction. I am good. How are you guys?
Doing awesome. Like I said, get back to actually talking some racing and what's going on in the racing world and everything. It's been cool. Talking with folks, but you get that itch. So, Kelly, you know how we start this show off every time. What are you drinking tonight?
You guys ask me that all the time. I've been on here a few times, and I never have a good answer. So I will disappoint again. I've just got some water. So I am trying to stay hydrated. It's very, very hot here in North Carolina, so I need to keep drinking more water.
And Sherwin, you can corroborate here. Is it indeed hot in North Carolina, or is she blowing smoke?
No, it's hotter than the hinges of a hell wagon.
Well, there you have it. So yeah, that's awesome. Sherwin, what do you got tonight?
Bourbon and ginger.
Bourbon and ginger. I got the bourbon and Coke
might
Zero.
Be a little fireball running around over here somewhere too. Who knows?
Look out! So Kelly, you said it before that it's been a while. So I think when I look on, it's always when I look on Skype and it's like, Kelly Crandall, you last talked like 9 months ago. I'm like, really? At least we see each other at the racetrack, I guess. But I can't believe how the time flies right by us. What you been up to?
Yeah, it has been a while. I mean, you guys have asked a few times, and it's just never worked out because all hell would break loose for one reason or another. So
No
I'm glad that it's been quieter lately. I mean, not completely quiet, but quieter, so we could do this. But like I said, just one day at a time, and trying to stay sane, trying to stay busy. And I'm excited, though. I was genuinely looking forward to tonight to just chat and talk racing, and I love how passionate you guys are. So I'm ready for whatever you got.
We're flattered.
Yeah, I mean, we should be, right? That's a nice compliment. But yeah, this has been 8 or 9 weeks in the making to finally put this together.
No kidding.
It has been something like that.
And we're never offended because we know stuff's going on, especially right now, all the NASCAR leaving and coming back and COVID and blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, hey, Kelly, you want to be on? I can't do it. Okay, it's cool. And then next week, hey, Kelly, you want to be on? Nope. Okay, cool. So we are just privileged to have you back. Let's start with this. Why don't you plug the podcast a bit? So, and how it's been going in the quarantine time. I know you just wrapped up with Coleman Presley and last week with Timmy Hill. How's it been?
It's been good. It's been really, really good. I'm quite proud of how the podcast has turned out. I feel like I'm personally getting much better as I go and trying to change things as I go, listening to people's feedback and reading the ratings and reviews and just trying to get better. And I feel like the guests have been great. So it's been going really, really well. I was really nervous when the pandemic started because I prefer to do all of my interviews in person because it's just easier and the technology is going to work. And as soon as we shut down for Atlanta all the way back in March, I said, one of my first thoughts aside from what's going on in the world and what's going on in NASCAR was, I want to continue the podcast. How am I going to do this? So I've had to adapt just like everybody else. And I've gotten really good at using Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and Microsoft Teams and and just about everything else. I mean, now I can plug my phone into external speakers and do it that way. And just every possible scenario you can try and do it. So whether it's that or even just NASCAR press conferences, the way we do those now remotely, I've just gotten good at adapting. So the podcast is going well. It seems like the feedback again every week is great. I know you guys post about it all the time. I appreciate that. And people seem to be enjoying it. And everybody that I've had on as a guest has seemed to enjoy it. So that's good. I haven't gotten turned down by anybody yet. So I'm really happy with it. It's come a long way. Again, I feel like I'm coming a long way, still trying to get better at doing it, but the guests have been phenomenal. So, Coleman Presley is this week. We went spotting and talking about Brad Keselowski, who he works with, and Austin Cindric and Todd Gilliland, and learned a lot about spotters having to adapt this year. Even them under COVID restrictions because they're not being able to spot from their normal locations at the racetrack. They're having to either go in the grandstands or go to different places because they have to be spread out as well. So great conversation. And next week is going to be even better. I mean, it's a phenomenal conversation that I've already recorded with BJ McLeod. And I'm so excited for that one. It was really, really good.
That's great. I listened to the Coleman Presley one already. I did not know much about him beyond having seen his name before. I'm glad he found a home doing something that he seems to be, enjoying quite well. And, get the call to come be Brad's spotter after Brad had a guy that flew his plane around for a couple of years. That seems to be an important next step for Coleman.
Yeah. Well, it's unique because I think when the news came out that Joey Meyer wasn't going to spot for Brad anymore, it kind of raised a lot of eyebrows because they had been paired together for a very long time. And so you're wondering, okay, who's going to step in and really fill that role, and to work with a champion and work with somebody like Keselowski. I mean, that's a pretty big honor and a very tall task. So it's really cool to hear how Brad talks about Coleman. If you've heard many of his interviews, particularly last year when they first paired up, he's been very complimentary of Coleman. And I said it right in the podcast. The reason I wanted to talk to Coleman was because Todd Gilliland actually talked about him on the podcast I did with him earlier this year and was very complimentary of how he's helping Todd as a younger driver. So again, I think it just raised some eyebrows when Brad and Joey ended their relationship, and then, to see who can come in and get the job done. Somebody that, if you have the support of Brad Keselowski, that's pretty damn impressive. So good for Coleman. And like I said, if you listen to him on the radio, I mean, he's really good, to the point, very professional, and I can see why a driver like Brad enjoys working with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's funny you say that, what you said earlier about kind of the restrictions and the challenges they have. We were talking with Eddie DeHaan about that, and it was very much paralleled. I think, didn't Eddie say at Pocono they could only have one spotter? And he was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
I think he said he had absolutely no view of what was going on in 3. It was just like, you got to clear yourself down there because I don't have that.
I don't know about Pocono. But the one that has stood out was Indy because Indy, of course, is obviously so big. And normally the spotters are on the pagoda, which is kind of central on the front stretch, and then they'll have another spotter positioned somewhere else. And this year they were down in the grandstands, I think more towards turn 1, which completely took away a lot of their sight lines.
Yeah.
And Drew Blickensturfer actually mentioned that he thinks that's one of the reasons that there was that accident on pit road, is because the spotters couldn't help the drivers get on pit road. A lot of the crew chiefs were doing it and calling drivers onto pit road. So I don't know about Pocono, but Indy is the one that stands out. And there's a few others. I know you guys probably listen to Door Bumper Clear religiously like I do. So
Yep.
I know they've talked about it a lot each week of what track has been good or hasn't been good. And again, the one that stands out to me is Indy.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing, going back to podcasting that me and Sherwin had as advice when we first started 252 episodes ago now is being consistent and releasing something on a schedule every week, or, continuing to do it. And I know there's a few folks who kind of put out podcasts sort of on a random schedule. And then there's folks like we try to do. And then like Kelly that you're doing right now, that you can just count on, hey, there's Kelly's podcast. Let's go. So, that's really cool to see that consistency and continuing to bring folks in. I love it. One thing you mentioned, though, you had kind of mentioned in passing about NASCAR press conferences and how they're virtual. What's that like?
Different. Very different. Everything's done through Zoom now. So it's nice to have just one way of doing it. We know what it's going to be every week, and you can still see who you're talking to, which is big for me. I like being able to see who I'm talking to, so you can kind of read that person a little bit more, and you basically know when they're done talking, so you don't talk over them. So I prefer it like that, and NASCAR's done a good job of adapting to it, and the drivers can do it, right from their phones or at home on their laptops. So, they're talking to us from inside their personal vehicles or sitting out on their porch or wherever it may be. So all post-race conferences are done that way. We're back to talking to the top 3, which for anybody who follows the media side of NASCAR, it had just been the winner and the crew chief coming into the media center, and then 2 through 10, the 10th place finisher, you had to go out on pit road and get them. And obviously now, because we don't have that access, NASCAR has gone back to quote unquote bringing in the top 3 finishers. So on the Zoom conferences after every race, we talk to the winning crew chief, 2nd place and 3rd place. And then during the week, going into a weekend, they'll offer up a driver or 2 to kind of preview the weekend or whatever you want to talk about. So they're doing a good job with that. Ford and Toyota actually do a great job because they're offering up their own people during the week themselves. So, tomorrow Toyota is hosting their own little conference with Austin Hill and Scott Zipadelli from the Truck Series. And so everybody's doing a good job of trying to adapt and figure out how to do it. So it's just weird. Everything, like I said, now is done through video and done through the computer of talking to people post-race or going into the weekend. So it's more personal than what I expected it to be. It's better than doing teleconferences or things over the phone all the time. So, but it's just, I feel like, I was thinking this earlier, it's like, I went to Bristol last week. We had the All-Star race, and it was so good to be at the racetrack, right? Like it was so good to just see something in person and get out of the apartment.
Rub it in.
But it feels like the sport is still happening without you, because you're in the press box and you're there, but you're not really there. So at least with the Zoom conferences, again, you're still getting that kind of face-to-face interaction. And again, everybody's just doing the best they can.
So what's been so far like the driver that had either the best background or the funniest interruption, personal interruption or anything like any crazy stuff happen?
Nothing too out of the ordinary. Nobody with really a crazy background. Like I said, everybody's been, sitting on their porches or in their personal vehicles. One of the more recent ones, so last week we talked to Denny Hamlin going into Texas, and he was sitting, I guess he was sitting outside somewhere. I mean, his house is huge. So he was sitting outside somewhere. And I guess the landscapers or somebody was there because like a weed whacker or something fired up, and he like jumped up and went over to tell him to be quiet. So I guess that's one of the more entertaining ones, but it hasn't really been too crazy of anybody interrupting or doing something like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned upcoming show, BJ McLeod. Do you have anything else in the works, in the plans that you can share with us? Some, juicy, what does my wife call it? Hot tea. I think that's what the popular kids are saying now. They're sipping tea, hot tea. I don't know. I don't know this stuff. I called it juicy tea one time, and she's like, that's not how it works. I'm like, oh, sorry.
I don't have a clue.
I don't know any of those expressions either. So yeah, BJ will be the next one, and like you guys said, try to drop them every Monday. So I've gotten pretty good at being consistent, which I remember we've talked about before in one of my past appearances. Was I was kind of struggling with that at first, but now I've got everything down to a schedule. So BJ is coming up next, and then I don't have anything else recorded yet, so I don't want to say kind of what's coming up because I don't want to jinx it. But I've got a few requests out there for different folks, and I'm sure those will get done, and I'll have something going forward. Yeah. But BJ is the next one that's already been recorded. So again, I don't want to jinx it with the request I already have out there.
That's okay. We accidentally lie to people all the time about, well, next week we got blah, blah, blah. And then, they had a little issue.
Yeah, I started either planning very far in advance or just, trying something at the last minute. So I knew you had already said yes. So it was just a matter of time of us being in the same internet space at the same time. But one of the things I wanted to add to what you said about, asking people and, trying to figure out who to ask and knowing what your lane is. And that's what I tell people that ask us when we get somebody on that, like, how did two jabronis from Atlanta get Eddie DeHaan on their podcast? And I said, it's real simple. I asked him, and he said yes.
There's no magic sauce, special ingredient. There's no
magic. All I try to do is make sure that I pay enough attention to what various and sundry people in the sport are doing, who they react to, and sometimes it's lightning in the bottle where I just happen to catch a thread that's really active, and I just sneak in there and say, and ask, and a lot of times they respond. Yeah. In the positive. I haven't got a no. I've got a few non-responses.
Right. A few future yeses.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's like sometimes I sit here and I'm like, you know what? You don't know until you ask. So I will say that I have one of those requests out right now where I'm kind of like, I'm thinking it's not really a long shot, but it's to me somebody that I wouldn't, like day one when I started the podcast would never have, like I would just tell you, it's probably never going to happen. So I do have one of those requests currently out, so we'll see what happens. I think the idea is being tossed around. So, but I'm the same way. It's like you don't know unless you ask. So I've kind of gotten better of just being like, just suck it up and ask. If you want somebody, just don't. I mean, okay, they'll tell you no, and it'll suck, but you don't. It's the same thing with anything. You don't take it personally. So I think I've gotten better about that. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think Rusty and I had that whole conversation of suck it up, Buttercup. The worst thing that can happen is they say no.
Yeah. And next thing you know, Kenny Wallace says yes. And we're like, crap.
Yeah. It's a 2-letter answer.
Yeah.
It should not hurt your feelings.
Right.
Well, it hurts my feelings because I don't like confrontation or rejection, and I take everything personal. So I have to put that aside and, learn to be a big girl sometimes and just be like, hey, you got a job to do. It's the same thing when you're going to talk to a driver that is going to be really pissed off, or they're probably not going to want to talk, but it's still my job to go ask. So, hey, just got to do it.
Well,
yep, just do it. Get some Nike in there.
That's right. So, what I said at the top of the show that I was so excited to do, let's go ahead and do it. It's time to tear it down. Goodness, I hope that didn't blow out any ears. I don't know what the volume was on it, but
I'm just glad I remembered to shut up when it went quiet.
But yeah, let's tear it down. Report card. Let's go to first period. The big news today, no practice or qualifying for the rest of the year. Kelly, you wrote an article about it. What's your take?
I like it. I really like it. So you look at it from two perspectives. The first one is just look at what the sport is trying to do right now. And I don't think it's inaccurate to say that everybody's just trying to get to the end of the year. I mean, we just need to get to the end of the year and take a deep breath once the off season comes. So I like the fact that I think this is helping teams right now. You know, some teams it's helping them financially, but every team it's helping them when it comes to you're lightening the load of what these teams have to do, because they're still working in shifts. They're still working, you know, long days, long hours just to get one car prepared every weekend. It would be really, really hard if they had to start preparing backups because we went back to qualifying and practice. So I pulled a quote in one of my stories from Alan Gustafson last week after they won the All-Star race, and he said the same thing. The schedule that we've had, if you think about it, with double headers, and we just raced on Sunday, now we're racing again this Thursday, there is no way the sport, you know, as Alan said, again, and his quote was, he doesn't think anybody would be able to keep their head above water with the schedule that we have now, just trying to prepare all these cars. So I like it from that perspective because I feel like it's the smart thing to do for the teams. And then I also like it from a personal perspective because I like going into a weekend where it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you got a race on Saturday, you got a race on Sunday, and then you go about your time. And, you know, during the week, you can focus on just racing stories or the news or what's going on, and you're not sitting there in front of the TV or in front of the computer for 3 days that weekend watching people log laps in practice or qualifying or waiting for this press conference or waiting for that press conference. So from a personal standpoint, I like it because it's much more streamlined. I've got some Zoom conferences on Thursday, and I can write my stories over the next couple days and just turn the TV on when it's race time. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, well, think about it this way. I mean, in terms of all those different video conferences y'all have been able to do, because drivers actually have time. So there are some benefits to this process. I know the drivers are getting to the track later and later, because they're doing stuff in their personal lives. But if they don't have to practice Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, and then race Sunday, they got a lot more time to do those simple things like jump on the computer for 25, 30 minutes and give you guys some content that we wouldn't otherwise get because they'd be in the race car.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to look at it is, you know, speaking from a media perspective, again, I like the fact that there are Zoom conferences on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and I have the next couple days to spread out some stories if I want to, because I don't have to worry about, well, I got to jam this practice story in here, and, you know, is somebody going to crash in practice, and I got to focus on that. And I feel like we can focus more on racing stories and less on who's doing what and just logging laps. So again, that's just my personal opinion.
So
go ahead, Rusty.
Oh, I was going to say it's no fat and all meat. We get to see every time we see cars run around the track, it counts, you know, and that's I think
it's cool. Racing for money.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say, I did see this counterpoint, so I'll bring it up because I like to talk about these things. And somebody on Twitter, I wish I still had it up so I could look. And they were very cordial about it, so it wasn't like somebody being an ass or anything. But they said, how about all these ARCA, Xfinity, you know, first-timers, teenage drivers that are going into Turn 1 at the Daytona Road Course with zero practice? And I thought, you know what? That's not too bad a point. Curious what y'all think.
They're gonna have practice, though. I think ARCA will be the only one that gets practice. And I could be wrong, but I thought I saw that somewhere.
Okay.
So we'll have to go look it up after we're done here. But I could be wrong, but I thought, and it was probably Bob, because Bob's on top of everything. I thought somebody had said ARCA is still going to have groups practicing or something, because they have been practicing before their races and whatnot.
Okay.
So, Rusty, I'm going to...
point. I know where you're going with that, because people have said that, you know, not just about the Daytona Road Course, but races in general, that the younger drivers are really missing out. So I think ARCA has been having practices. I'm not completely dismissing that point anyway, but what I will say is that simulation is so good nowadays that, you know, all of these drivers, whether it's veterans or rookies, are really using that before they go to these racetracks. So yeah, nothing beats real life on track experience, but it's not like they're going into these races blind. But again, I see both sides of it.
Mm-hmm. Sherwin, you were about to say?
Oh yeah, well I thought of something today that I wanted to ask Kelly that I forgot to tell you to put in the show sheet, but she brought up Bob, so I'm going to sneak it in here now because I don't think it'll be a very long answer. What is your Bob Pockris, does this track have lights question? Do you have one that people hit you with like every week?
Yeah. I love it.
No, I can't say nothing that comes to mind. I can't say that I do. I mean, not one that's like asked like the same one.
Right.
I mean, there are questions sometimes that would appear obvious, but then I have to remind myself not everybody is in depth or paying attention to every little detail. So, but I can't say that there's one question that comes up every week. The same.
Okay.
That's and I love that point too, because I think, when we talk about this show and our podcast, we've said it before, we don't really talk about news other than reacting to it, and we kind of almost make the assumption, if you will, that folks are paying attention to something. So, it's kind of a leap. You get asked something, and you kind of go, wait a second, I need to give them the benefit of the doubt. They are, asking it in a place of innocence and going to somebody who they think has, that they can respect to give that answer. So, yeah. I love that. Back on the no qualifying, no practice. I guess the big question is for me, what does this mean for playoffs? Once we get to playoffs, what does that look like? Kelly, what do you think?
Well, I mean, it looks like we have no practice. As far as qualifying, I'm going to be really interested to see how they set the lineup, because Scott Miller had said that yesterday on Sirius, and I wrote the story that they were looking at doing something different to determine the starting lineup for playoff races, because, obviously those are going to be very, very important, and you're going to have a lot of the, playoff guys here, there, and everywhere, and you got to kind of figure out, as he said, kind of a better way to do it. So I'm going to be really interested to see how they come up with that. I know a lot of people have had ideas on Twitter and, fastest lap times or more inverts or whatever it may be. So I'm going to be as interested as everybody else to see what happens. But again, I'm not really all that concerned, because I think these guys have proven they can jump in these cars and go race, and it's fine. The only downside, again, is just starting position, because this aero package is so, however you want to look at it, track position is king. And you look at some guys who spend a lot of the day just trying to dig themselves out of a hole because of where they start. Then it takes them a while to get up to the front. So, again, I'm going to be as interested as anybody to see kind of how they set these lineups for the playoffs. But I'm not concerned when it comes to the, racing or the integrity of the championship. I think all that's going to be fine. So, and again, I haven't heard any drivers or anybody complain about it yet, at least on the record, so that, that they're worried about it. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Let's move on to second period. And we had a lot of racing in the past week, so let's talk about it. Starting with that all-star race at Bristol. Sherwin, Chase Elliott winning. Y'all, we were down at a lake house with some friends who have all been, doing their social distancing and everything else, and this is one of those that we decided, okay, well, we can get these folks together. We've all been sort of quarantining together. So far, so good, and on all of that. Say what you will about it, but I think we've all kind of worked it out. But we're sitting there on at the lake house, which the only TV is a CRT television. Those still exist, and it has cable that's kind of downgraded from HD. You can hardly read the leaderboard, everything else. And sure, when we saw Chase Elliott take that race, how about that?
Well, and we weren't allowed to flip any couches because they didn't belong to us. That was really the only downside. That and it took longer for me to make my dinner plate than it did to run that race.
Yeah, that was awesome to see. So a few things that NASCAR tried, and whether or not it worked, whether or not it was great, and whether or not they'll use it later, I always applaud NASCAR for trying something new. I love it And this is the place to do it. First off, the fact that the All-Star race was at Bristol. Kelly, what'd you think?
Oh, I loved that decision. I had said that from day one, that it was the perfect place to put it. So I'd love to see it there more. I think the only downside was the racing was not as good as expected, but I think that's just because of the length of the race and because it takes a while to kind of work in those other grooves, and the race was just so quick. So, but in general, I thought that was the best place that they could have moved it. So I was really happy about that and happy for Bristol because we know there's been great racing and great drama there. So I thought it was a great decision.
Yeah, and I don't know if what we're going to end up with going forward with the fact that we still have two major companies that own racetracks, but with the success they had at Bristol, I'm not saying don't go back because it looks cool, and if you could get 130,000 fans to show up for that thing, it would be even cooler. But you got to start thinking about other small tracks with lights and doing weekday all-star races, the Martinsvilles, South Bostons, stuff like that.
Yeah, totally agree. Don't keep this momentum going with finding a new place to do the All-Star race, and bring it back to Charlotte every once in a while, but do it at Bristol, do it at who knows where. The world's your oyster at this point when it comes to that. Eldora.
Hell, keep it in Tennessee and go to the fairgrounds.
There you go.
That'd make everybody happy.
There you go. Yeah. Second thing to talk about, Choose Cone. So we tried that one out. Kelly, what do you think?
I mean, I don't have anything negative to say. From what I heard, it didn't sound like TV did the best job of kind of showing everybody how it worked. So I know, again, I was there, so I could see it in person, so I could physically see who was moving where. And it looked like a few guys were using it, but it wasn't that big jump that I think people were expecting. You weren't going to see a guy go from like 9th to 2nd, but there were people who moved maybe 2 or 3 spots. So I thought it was fine. I thought it went well. There was no controversy around it. Everybody knew what to do. The drivers, it wasn't like this was something where they couldn't figure it out. So I have nothing negative to say. I didn't hear any drivers who had anything negative to say. I think it would be interesting to see it used at racetracks that definitely have a line disadvantage, because then you could really see drivers who may move up some spots. Again, I just think with Bristol, the lanes weren't that much of an advantage or a disadvantage, and the race was so short that I'm not sure we really got a good idea of how it worked. And again, just going by some feedback that I saw online, I think some fans would have liked maybe TV to kind of show it a little bit better of who was doing what.
Yeah, I think so. This is what I'll add to this, is we needed to try it. First of all, it didn't really show up on TV that well. That doesn't mean it didn't work. But and a lot of that, I think, is how fast the race went by. You just didn't even have any time to see what was going on, really. But we need a track, like you said, that's definitely got a preferred groove if you're on new tires, but maybe a higher groove might be advantageous on older tires, and that's when you might see a whole bunch of people pit for 4 and a whole bunch of people pit for 2 and a whole line move up.
Yeah. I'm excited to see that happen, and I think this is something that, to Kelly's point, the fact that it was a non-issue means that it is something that you can probably scale. Like people weren't crashing trying to figure out Choose Cone, right?
Well, and it wasn't a distraction to the product, and that's what you want.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that hard to do. You go left or you go right. So it's, I think I know it's easy to kind of, joke about these guys being the, best drivers in the world and, give them crap sometimes about not being able to do certain things. But I think it was pretty self-explanatory that they could, you go left or you go right once you get to a certain point on the racetrack. So I would have loved to have seen it at Kentucky, because I know I know there was a lot of talk Kentucky weekend about that bottom lane was really just not the place to be. So I think it would have been interesting to see it at a place like that. But I like how they did it, non-points race, try it out at Bristol, try it out at a short track. So if it comes back in the future, I think there's definitely going to be races and race tracks that it will be used more at than others.
Yeah. So a couple of maybe more, I won't say controversial, but maybe a little more different than those. Undercarriage lighting, so we had that. It was. I felt like that was almost a distraction for me. Like, wait, what's going on? What are we doing? And we found out, different manufacturers had different things, and then it was like who's locked in versus who's not, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if I ever got like a great explanation of what was going on. Kelly, you're shaking your head.
Well, I think that was just an example of sometimes, NASCAR has a great idea, but then they get too involved. So obviously this came about from Nashville, where the Ganassi cars showed up with it for the burnouts. And I was in Nashville, so I saw it up close and personal, and it looked awesome. Mm-hmm. But there was obvious differences. The cars in Nashville were up off the ground. They weren't planted on the ground, so you could see more of the lights. They were color-coded for their sponsors. So, Kyle Larson at the time driving the Credit One Chevrolet, blue paint scheme with blue lights, and then Kurt with the green for Monster. What happened at Bristol was they didn't put the lights, I don't think, all the way around the car, kind of as the Ganassi cars did in Nashville, and they were color coordinated to the manufacturers. So Toyota had red, Chevrolet had, I believe it was amber is what they called it, and Ford, of course, blue. So it was different than what everybody was expecting. It was a little bit of a letdown. But at the end of the day, I think for young kids, they probably liked it. They probably thought it was cool. For me, it did nothing. It did nothing for me, and it kind of, I wouldn't say it was a distraction, other than the fact when they first turned them on and rolled out on the racetrack, the color under the Chevrolets made it look like their cars were on fire, and I thought somebody had cut a tire and was sparking. But I'm sure some people enjoyed it. Me personally, I didn't get anything from it. I thought it was a little goofy on a race car and professional stock car racing. But at the end of the day, it didn't hurt anybody. And again, some people liked it, some people don't. But it was a good idea in theory, but the execution, I don't think, was what everybody was anticipating.
Yeah. What I want to interject is, what was weird about it is they're basically suggesting that the rest of us don't know which one, a Ford, a Toyota, or a Chevy are, if they're not all wearing the same color running board lights that, frankly, have been around since the 80s on lowrider pickup trucks, usually purple. But I just didn't at a super lit up Bristol. We don't go to a dark racetrack. Maybe Daytona. Running that race at night where there's dark places in parts of the track because the IMSA guys have to run headlights.
Well, so again, I was there and I saw it in person. Seeing it in person, I didn't think it was a problem in terms of the lighting with the racetrack and whatnot. I know there was some talk before that of, as you said, Bristol is very well lit. They've got a tremendous lighting system there. But again, I saw it in person. I thought it was okay. I didn't care for it, but I thought it was fine. It looked fine. And again, I think the only thing that was missing out was people were, kind of looking for them to be maybe all around the race car.
I like the idea of, we get excited about paint schemes. Look at this paint scheme. What if we get excited about Chase is running orange lights for the Hooters car this time, or we get the green monster lights for Kurt or something that, I think, to what Kelly was saying before, when those kind of match the sponsors, it's sort of it was just kind of weird that, okay, by manufacturer, it just seems more like of a robotic weird thing to me. But I think there's opportunity there to maybe get me excited, but it was ho-hum.
Yeah, we missed a great opportunity for Jimmy to get to run that really bright purple color that's on his hood. Yeah, agreed. So last thing that they tried, maybe they tried some more stuff, but paint schemes. I felt like there were some that really hit for me. I really liked a few of them, and dare I say, because we were not huge fans of Denny here, but I thought Denny's car looked good. There were others, and I can't remember who I didn't like, but there were others that I was just like, okay, that just looks weird with the numbers, move back and whatnot. Sharon, what do you think? Um, I don't want to pick hills to die on. If that's the way NASCAR thinks that they can provide a better financial opportunity to a sponsor, then just do it. But I think it looks dumb.
Mm,
I think I want the biggest number I can get right there, slap on the door where the driver's sitting.
yeah.
I
Kelly?
think that's always been with the brand. We don't. I mean, people obviously care that Ally is willing to put their money on Jimmy's car, but Jimmy is the 48. He'll
Mm-hmm.
always be the 48.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kelly, what'd you think?
I had said when they first floated this idea out there that I was kind of like Dale Jr. This was going to be a hill I would die on. I won't say that I've completely come around to it. I will say that I think some paint schemes did a better job than others, and didn't look as terrible. There were some that the numbers were too small or too high up or whatever it may be. So I won't say I've completely come around to it. I would not be in favor of it full time just because I don't like change. I'm kind of a traditionalist, and I know people are going to tell me that way, 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 way back in the day that the numbers were not necessarily centered on the door frame. But for the longest time in this sport, that is what we have done, and that's kind of what I've identified as a race car, is big centered numbers on the door. And again, I completely understand from a business standpoint, there's probably monetary value there and all that. But speaking just personally and taking all that out of it and what I like as a viewer, and I consider myself a fan, I want to see big door numbers and identify a race car and a driver by that number. So I think, again, some teams did a great job with paint scheme and it wasn't so bad, and then some other ones weren't as great and needed a little bit of work. So I'm kind of like Dale Jr. I'm not completely closing the door on it. I don't know if it's a hill I still will die on, but I like it the way that it was.
Well, I think the teams that have whatever their font is for 2-digit numbers, that's typically pretty wide, they're disadvantaged through this process because it's much harder to tell what the number is. Like the one that came to mind for me was the 42.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Or the rendering I saw of it anyway. I don't even know if Kenseth made the race, but I don't know if that car's qualified in with Kyle or what. But it didn't. Like I said, we were kind of in and out on watching this race to begin with. But I looked at a ton of the paint schemes. That William Byron paint scheme was trash, and I'm sorry, Exalta, but it was.
Well, let's move on to Texas. In the Xfinity race, we see Kyle Busch cross the line first and then DQ'd afterwards for ride height. I don't think there's a whole lot. I don't know. Did y'all have anything interesting about that? It was one of those like, well, we've seen it happen already. This maybe is one of the more high-profile cases of it, but, NASCAR sticking to their guns there, so, good on them, I guess.
Well, we've had three of these now across the major 3 series, and I think we're getting used to the idea that, yeah, okay, you fell post race. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory at this point. So
yeah, it's exactly how I thought the conversation would go, which is, yep, that's what happens nowadays. So, like you said, kind of normalizing it. That this is what happens. Like Sherwin said, post race, if you fail, then that's what happens now. So maybe it was a little surprising, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, shocking, blah blah blah. So moving on to the Cup race, I guess what was surprising, maybe even a little shocking to me, the top 2 podium spots, if we call them those, Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick. So still trying to get used to the newer names up top. We've talked about it a few times, especially this season, Sherwin, about Cole Custer winning a race, and now we got Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick, and not just winning the race, but this is securing playoff positions too. And so this is it's interesting to me. Once we talk later, maybe about what the playoff picture looks like. But there's some spoil sports, if you will.
I think the thing that's it doesn't shock me that RCR has been able to put together a good enough speed to be 1-2 in a race. I'm shocked that it's Austin that won it and not Tyler.
Yeah. Kelly?
I would have reversed it and been less shocked. How about that?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would use the word shocking. I think, and I tried to break it down a little bit today in a story that I wrote, kind of evaluating that finish and RCR and whatnot. And I think what that does is highlight the importance of track position, and you get in that clean air and you've got it made. And at the same time, when you lose that track position, you're going to have a very long day. I mean, you can go back over the last couple weeks, look at drivers who are good during one portion of the race, and then as soon as they lost the lead, they were nowhere to be found. And the one that comes to mind is go back just last week to Kentucky, where Eric Almirola was so good from the front row at the start of the race, and then as soon as he lost the lead, he was never really back up there challenging for it. So you put those two cars up there, and now they've got track position, and the tire that they brought to Kentucky, I think brought to Texas, I think was the same one from Kentucky. It's not wearing at all. So you could put Austin up there on 2 tires, and you can put Tyler up there on no tires, and again, you've got it made. So they outsmarted everybody else because they did their homework. They knew what Cole Custer had done last week, and they knew if you get track position and you fight hard enough, you should be able to keep it, and the tire wasn't wearing. So good on them for that. And the next part of that too is, I think people would be quick to jump and say, oh, well, it's a fluke or so on and so forth. I would say the Childress cars have been fast. They're not dominant race cars, but like Joe Gibbs has or Roger Penske has, but they have fast race cars. They just need the track position because, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, is you're spending a lot of your day just trying to dig out of a hole of where you start. And you look at Tyler Reddick, who we have seen run in the top 10 and run in the top 5 this year, but a lot of it comes later in the race because he's starting 24th or 27th every week or 20th or whatever it may be. So I wouldn't completely slap down RCR 1-2 as saying it's a one-time thing. Again, they played Texas perfectly, but I would also say that they've gotten their cars much better. The Chevrolets are much better this year, and they just needed track position and to get up there and to show that they are, I think, in my opinion, they're top 12 cars. And all they did at Texas was just take advantage of the situation. And they showed once they got to the front, they had good speed. I mean, they kind of broke away from 3rd and 4th place for a little bit on one of those restarts. So it was kind of a perfect storm for them. But at the same time, I would also argue that it's not like these guys are running 25th every week. And that company is much better off this year than they were even just a year ago.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on the cars. I would only add one small caveat to the tire and the wear. We're seeing the tires wear. The problem is they're not slowing down. So that's why we get these corded tires at these places like Kentucky and Texas. But they're not losing any speed. They're only falling off maybe 2.5 tenths. And I would love to see David Smith do an analysis, and maybe he already has, on his whole peer rating thing on starting on the front row versus starting on the 3rd row or the 2nd row. And I'm sure he's done some of this and figure out, because it sounds like when people like the door bumper clear guys are being pretty exaggerative about being first, and the person who gets to pick when the restart starts, that for like 10 laps, it's worth 3 tenths until the tires start to balance themselves out. And so it's like super important to be on the front row. And maybe that's why the choose cone at some of these bigger tracks might make things really interesting.
Hey, full circle. I love it. Somewhat related.
Need to fall off more, though. I mean, I think we all can agree on that. I mean, the tires, absolutely. I mean, these tires should not be able to run 1,000 laps at Bristol or a Martinsville on a set of tires. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. I want to go back to races where it was legitimate tire fall off, and these guys had to know what tire conservation was and how to take care of their stuff and manage their runs and make it through a race, and not just worry about my track position, let me just get to the competition car. Like, no, I want to see them come down pit road and you need 4 tires. Hey, I busted my ass and I wore a tire out, and and I want that to mean something more than, oh, I wore out my right front tire and now I can't do anything because of dirty air. Like, no, I want you to wear out your right front tire or wear out your tires because the tires are legitimately wearing out on the racetrack. I mean, I miss tire wear races. I miss guys that actually had to manage their equipment.
Well, Rusty and I can talk to you about that till we're both blue in the face, because that's the way Casey Kane raced.
Absolutely.
He'd start the restart on the front row, and then by 2 laps in, he was in 10th. And then 20 laps later, he was back in the lead.
Yeah.
When he was that 6-year win that he had in 2006, you could almost set your watch by it, like when his car would take back off again and he would just drive by everybody.
Yeah, and I think what both of y'all are saying too is more of a progressive tire fall off instead of Sherwin like that. Well, 0.3 until the tire kind of comes in. But
by then you're already gone.
Right.
You got a 1.5-second lead or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it has to be more. It has to be more progressive. It has to be more wear, more fall off. Like, you need to notice it.
Yeah.
And I think the grip boogers may have lived their usefulness out at this point.
That's possible.
That's a whole separate.
Let's move on to this then. So, speaking of that front row of Austin Dillon, Tyler Reddick, some of that possibly had to do with and this is how little I know him, Quinn Hoff, who replaced Landon Castle this year, involved in this.
Hoff, like the
Hoff. Yeah.
Star Wars moon.
And he was involved in this, baffling wreck where he just sort of like, I'm going to turn down a pit road now. And
he just pitted from the 3rd lane. It was like, what?
Yeah. And so Brad Keselowski kind of saying, he was very respectful in the way he said it, but he's essentially saying, should we demote people? And kind of say, no, like NASCAR come and just go, no, you're done. In this series, when there's so much at stake and the sponsors and the drivers and everything else, is there any legs to that?
I think that would be really hard to do, the way the sport sort of works.
Sure.
If Quinn Hoff, whatever family money he's got or whatever relationship he has with other people who have money that are willing to keep on playing, even if he's tearing up cars. And I guess that's that car that Castle was in last year that he never wrecked, by the way. Not once.
Well, I think I saw that he didn't wreck it. He had wrecked out twice the whole season, and Quinn has wrecked out 4 times thus far. And it's been, a little crazy there. I don't know. Kelly, does this have legs?
I don't know if it has legs. I will say I think Brad's point was more not necessarily focusing on the demoting part. I think we need to go back and look at the qualifications to get to Cup. And this is not speaking specifically about Quinn Hoff. It's in general, you look at a lot of these guys who come up the ranks, and it's so quick through the series nowadays, right? We always talk about, 1 year here, 1 year here, or part-time here, or whatever it may be. I think Brad's point more was looking at the qualifications and getting to the Cup Series so that you don't have to focus on the demotion part. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it has legs. I think he had a good point. I think we need to look at drivers who, again, not speaking specifically to Quinn Hoff, but if you're using this example, Quinn ran 17 races last year, and now he's full-time this year. He has very limited starts in Xfinity, has no truck starts, and I think he also has very limited starts in ARCA or wherever else he's been. So for the sake of this conversation, just use that as an example, and I'm not talking about whether I believe he needs to be demoted or all that. I'm not getting into that. I think there is something to talking about qualifications, how quickly guys are moving up. I mean, we know NASCAR is very set on what age these guys can run certain racetracks, so maybe we need to, again, just focus more on who's approved for where and how quickly people are moving up through the ranks.
Yeah, I love it. We'll move on to, let's see, got a few things I want to talk about. Actually, so Mick Rose had asked us this on Twitter, and I had already had it kind of as a talking point, but this superstar racing experience with Tony Stewart, this whole league is we talked about, or we said the phrase before, getting some legs, and this one's got some legs, it seems. If you're not familiar, it's like a IROC for short tracks. It's got backing from Ray Evernham. And it sounds like CBS is on board to show us some of those races on broadcast. I don't know, Kelly, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm probably like a lot of people, which is I'm very intrigued because it's something new. So anytime something new comes along, there's a lot of hype around it and a lot of interest. And when you have something with the word superstar in it, that certainly raises the bar of who exactly you're going to put in this series. So. Again, it's kind of like the XFL, and I'm not saying this is the perfect analogy, but you've got something already established over here, but then you have something new that's coming in. You're going to be drawn to see what that is. So I'm very intrigued. I'm actually looking forward to listening to Ray Evernham on the Dale Jr. Download. I haven't gotten a chance to listen to that yet, but I'm sure he probably talked more about it and explained more about how it's going to work and what to expect. So I'm interested to dig into it, but I'm like everybody else. I'm kind of excited to see how it's going to work, and who exactly qualifies as a superstar is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I really liked the IROC series, and and for folks who may be new to listening to us or whatever, or new to the sport and can't remember it, but IROC is. Here's a car. Everybody's got the exact same car. This is all about the racer. And so it'll be, I love that part of it, knowing it's all about the racer. It's about the strategy, about the pit stops, about the crew, all that stuff. I really like it. So looking forward to seeing what we're getting there. Kelly, did want to ask you this, and it's something that I think me and Sherwin will just sit back and let you talk, because we did get a question from Brandon over at Lap Traffic Podcast. The professor says, what did you think of the swamp match at the WWE Horror Show pay-per-view on Sunday?
Well, it's not going to take me very long to answer, because I got to admit I'm very confused by what I saw. So I like that the WWE is another one of those that's had to adapt during COVID, where it's letting them do a little bit do things a little bit differently, such as these more cinematic matches, I guess you would say, where they're pre-recorded and they're not in a building, so you have more to work with and you can put some music to it and all this other stuff. So I love that part of it, because I thought they did a fantastic job at WrestleMania with the AJ Styles Undertaker Boneyard match. I thought that was phenomenal. I've watched it multiple times because it was so good. But the swamp match, I'm very confused by what I saw and what happened. So I did watch the pay-per-view. I put it on after Texas was over and watched it from the beginning and caught up. I thought there was some great wrestling matches. There was, of course, a few things that you question, like you do most sports and entertainment. But as far as the swamp match, I have no idea. I don't really have an opinion other than I was very confused watching it.
Love it. Love it. Sherwin, what do you think of the swamp? No. Like I said,
pass.
We'll just
pass.
All good. Well, folks, let's go ahead and gas it up. Here we go. There it is. Time to talk about Kansas going up there. Kelly, what sort of storylines are you following going into Kansas?
I mean, same old, right? I think it's going to be the same guys at the front. I think Clean Air will be king. A night race at Kansas is always pretty interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the temperature is, because I feel like Kansas had a really good race last year with this package, but it was a lot cooler last year. So being in July, it's probably going to be hot. So I guess that won't really translate. But I think it's going to be a lot of the same of what we've seen. I think Denny will be good. I think the Stewart-Haas cars will be good. The ones to watch are the Hendrick cars. I mean, the Hendrick cars have been so
bridesmaid
bad. Aside from Chase, I mean, Alex Bowman has not been as strong as he was pre-COVID shutdown. I mean, he could have won multiple races before the shutdown, and he was strong at first when we came back, but that team has kind of slid off the radar recently. So, William Byron is struggling. They've only had, I think, one top 10 in the last 5 races, and Jimmy, of course, still they're Jimmy and William down by that bubble trying to get in the playoffs. So they're struggling. I'm really, really surprised right now. But
Sure.
Other than that, I think it's going to be kind of same old. And then if anybody for the 3rd straight week goes up there and kind of snookers everybody at the end and steals the checkered flag.
Sherwin, do they have lights at Kansas?
Yes, I believe they do.
As it turns out. Folks, it's time to start closing this thing down and doing some picks. So the last time we did picks, Sherwin, was for Kentucky. That's 18 races ago. I mean, it was 3, but, I can be off by a factor of 6 for the sake of exaggeration. But Kyle Busch, you picked 21st. I picked Brad in 9th. So you'll be going before me, but before you, let's get our special guest. Kelly, who are you looking at for Kansas?
Well, like as I just said, I think Stewart-Haas and I think Denny will be good. I'll go with Kevin Harvick. I think clearly he's the best Stewart-Haas car right now. Did he win this race last year or didn't win it? Maybe was this the race where he had the tear off on the nose or something? I think he dominated. All these races run together, but either way, he's going to be good. So I'll go with the 4.
There it is, the 4. Sherwin, give us a pick.
Martin Truex Jr.
Truex, my man. I dig it. What is there something you saw there, or is it just kind of time?
I still think that over the course of the last 4 years, 3.5 years now, he's the best intermediate track driver. He's the fastest guy. And I don't know if he's running into the same luck that Kyle's running into, but they're bound. One of them's bound to break out of it. I'm done picking Kyle to be the one that does it.
Well, let's see. Who's old Rusty going to go with? Somebody who showed some speed at Texas. So if we're going to another place like that, how about Joey Logano? So I feel like I've picked him a lot, but I don't know. I might have to roll it back and see how many times I've done that.
He's won 3 races, hasn't he?
Well, there's that, but so yeah, good pick. All right, woohoo! Yeah. Awesome. We'll be looking forward to that race. So it's time to start closing this thing down. I can't believe it's already been. I mean, we've been hour and 4 minutes going on. So like I said, I was so excited to come in talk about racing. We sit here and talk about racing, and now an hour's gone by, and I can't talk about. Well, not that I can't, but I can talk about it with the cats, but I'm not sure they'll be very interested. So, so be it. Kelly, why don't you close this out? Tell the folks where they can find you and what's coming up next.
Well, we talked about the podcast at the beginning of the show, so that, and of course, stay tuned to racer.com. Hopefully people have that bookmarked as one of their sites to go to check out what's the latest on there. And then Twitter is just at Kelly Crandall. Instagram is the same way. And Facebook there's my public Facebook page. So if you find my normal one, I guess you could say, don't be disappointed if I never look and never see it, because I hardly use that one, so don't be offended. So look for the public one. That's where all the links and podcasts and everything are. So pretty simple.
Good deal. And Sherwin, why don't you close us out, and then we will get the show on the road.
Yeah, you can find me at Pregame Engineer and at Andrew Sherwin on Instagram. Obviously, our Instagram for the podcast is the same as Twitter. And Rusty, back to you.
There we go. Y'all know what the deal is. PTMpodcast.com, at PTM Podcast on the Twitter handle. As always, I'm Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace, at Tailgate Mayor on Twitter. I can't wait to talk to y'all next week after Kansas. I don't even know who the guest is yet, but we'll figure that out. We'll have it down to you. Want to thank Kelly Crandall for joining us and hanging out, and obviously go listen to the Racing Writers podcast. So we will talk to y'all next week. Have a good one. There we go. That's a wrap.
Skew!
Woo! Kelly, I said it in the outro. I don't know how much of that you can hear or anything, but we didn't say it beforehand, so thank you very much for hanging out with us and having a good old time on a Tuesday evening talking NASCAR.
No worries. It's like I said, it's always fun to be able to talk and interact with somebody about it. So instead of sitting here talking to the dogs.
Do you have the same
especially
thing?
You can be a little, as Ron White would say, unprofessional with us.
I try not to be too bad.
Well,
no, I'm just
never know
joking.
who's paying attention.
I've said this about the times that me and Sherman go on some other podcasts and stuff that like just being a podcaster and knowing how much goes into. And we get to split it a little bit, or a lot of it. Sherwin does, all the social media stuff. I'm doing the IT / putting together the sparse show notes that we have, but the show notes and stuff, and making sure the Patreon stuff is up to date and blah, blah, blah. But to be able to just, go in and, no prep, whatever, I'm going to sit down and do a podcast, it kind of reminds you of, yeah, I really do like talking NASCAR.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, I do the same thing. Sometimes you just want to talk to people about it.
Right.
It's different than just tweeting or whatever, like that personal interaction of debating or just talking to people and throwing stuff out there, and that's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've kept you on. I think the what is it? The pumpkin or the whatever carriage turned into a pumpkin. I don't know. I'm lost on my Cinderella analogies here, but it's getting late is what I'm trying to say. So we don't want to keep you up too long. Appreciate you hanging out with us. And what's you don't know what's your next race yet, do you?
No.
Okay.
Hopefully both Daytona races, but I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Cool. Well, thanks again for hanging out and chilling with us and talking NASCAR and whatnot. We'll get this thing closed out, but yeah, I think that's a wrap, folks.
All right, no worries.
All right,
Kelly, take care. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, and there's it made Sherwin really big on there, so let's see if I can fix that. If I just kind of do, whoop. Oh, no, well, you get widescreen Sherwin if you're still hanging out on YouTube. Good times. Let's see, I need to log in, so just got to do a few things here to get this thing up. Sherwin, good times, man.
Yeah, it really was. Good thing I got the blurred background, so you're good. You really don't. I'm not as wide as I used to be, so it's not egregious.
Oh man. Oh crap. Podbean has completely changed their entire.
Oh goody.
Okay, so how do I do a new episode? I have no idea. Upgrade? No. What am I doing? What's going on? Who moved my cheese?
Yeah. What do I do with my hands?
Yeah. How do we make this happen? This is horrific. Upgrade. No. Where's the button? Go to distribute. That's horrific. No, I don't want that. Episodes list. How about new episode? New episode. There it is. All right. Give me the button. Good Lord. You know, I mean, I know I'm being over exaggerating here, but I appreciate that they have, a new interface. It all looks good and everything. But, as a podcaster, here we go. So this is a guy in software talking. Let's do real talk right now. Like, as a podcaster, what's the thing that I want to do when I go to my page? I want to upload a new podcast. So give me that button front and center when I log in. You know what I mean?
It should be so big you virtually trip over it.
Right. But now I have to go to like episodes, episode lists, and then hit new. And maybe there's a different way to do it, but it's not as loud as it needs to be. So, yeah. Anyway, there's software Rusty talking right now.
Well, it's marketing Rusty at the same time, though, too.
We make scheduling software for hospitals and stuff. If you go to our website and go to the schedule page, there's a big old button that says new schedule. Like it's, so yay us. But,
well, Podbean.
Yeah. Podbean, listen up. I mean, it's pretty.
You get a thumbs down today.
It looks nice. All I need is a big old button. That's it. I don't need much else. More episodes.
The interface for you as an uploader way different than it is for me as just a viewer / potential listener.
Yes, way.
Okay, different. I kind of figured it was. I mean, that only makes sense because I never have seen an upload button. Not that I would have messed with it.
Yeah. Very different, and we'll see once it goes out what kind of interesting stuff I get. So, yeah. Anyway, it's time to shut down the old stream doodle-doo here. So thank you, everybody, for hanging out. PT and Posse, y'all were lively tonight. Appreciate it. Hope y'all had fun, just like we did. Kelly was excellent, as she always is. So, yeah, very happy to...
True.
Yep.
True that.
Very happy to have her on. So we will